You can literally say and do anything. I am nervous though, but it's fine. Sorry, guys, for all the drama I've made them go through when I'm like, you're fine, calm down, it's fine.
You're going to do great.
All right, so when you go to start, just like that.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready, and I'm here.
Oh, hi. You're listening to Service from Hell, a podcast featuring people that are currently in customer service positions or the lucky ones that got out, and all of the good, bad, and infinitely irritating things that go along with that work. I'm lawyer and writer Megan Gaffney Painter, and I am qualified to discuss this as I used to work as a hostess at a restaurant called Perkins, and in a single day voided every credit card transaction that occurred under my watch. So let's eat. I'd like to welcome our guest, Kate Gaffney. Kate is an actor and writer originally from a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. After graduating from St. Louis University, she moved to Southern California to pursue the arts. In Los Angeles, Kate studied improv at Second City, IO West, and the Groundlings. Kate has been fortunate to work on some super fun films and shows, and she has worked an impressive amount of customer service jobs. Kate finds that human beings can be both good and insanely frustrating. I better know Kate from being raised in the same house as she and having the same parents. So, Kate, welcome to your own podcast.
Thank you.
Tell us, what got you started?
Oh, that's a really excellent question you've just developed, Megan. Wow, that's really good.
I read it on this sheet.
Did you? The sheet I have created? Oh my God. Okay, got me started. So I'm nervous. Now I feel for the guests. So always was interested in acting. You and I had a co-production. It wasn't ours, but we were both in the play Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where I was an Oompa Loompa. I forget what you were.
I don't remember this.
You don't remember?
I don't actually think I was in it.
Really? I feel like...
Was I?
I don't know.
think so.
Okay, I lied. The production we were in together was A Christmas Carol.
Yes.
Okay, you played the ghost of Christmas future? Present. And I was a townsperson. So again, always being second fiddle to you and always playing the lesser roles. I think that's what got me started. It's really your fault. And yeah, just got the bug early, wanted to do some form of entertaining, really just like... I don't know, just like shticking it up all the time. You and I used to dress up and play. There was we once ruined several sheets by using permanent marker to draw on them when we created this like clown theater. So we put a bunch of makeup on our faces. Do you not remember this either?
No.
I promise this happened. So
She's right. I'm very sleep deprived. Okay. So
she has young ones. So we painted our faces with like just clown paint that we had in the house. And there used to be this massive piece of furniture that Dad had from like his office.
Yes, the light box.
Yes. And then we put sheets over it and decided, well, permanent marker makes the most sense. And so I forget what we drew, but anyway, we were performing always. So we performed for Mom and Dad, who were through gritted teeth watching the performance, frustrated that we had ruined, I think, multiple sets of sheets, I think. And yeah, I used to do accents and voices and all that nonsense for camp counselors because I had one camp counselor who would give us candy if we made her laugh. Hi, Angie. And so I was like, candy for giggles? Like, yes, that's a currency. I totally understand. So yeah.
Okay, so my question to you, sorry to interrupt,
no, you're fine.
Did you adjust your humor style did you try to figure out what made her laugh and do that, or did you do your own thing and she just responded to it? That's
a really good question. Mostly, she thought it was funny that I could say coffee talk and do a New York accent like that. Like it was just mostly absurd, so extreme, very stereotypical New York accent, but I could do it when I was younger and had never seen SNL really, but she thought the coffee talk was very funny on SNL. So me and this other girl at camp would we didn't know what it was. We would just be like, here we are at coffee talk. And then we would pause and be like, that's the scene. And like, she would giggle because I don't know how old we were. And so of course it was like, oh, I'm getting this immediate feedback. I'm super into this. And then I just kept it up throughout high school. And I had a really supportive high school experience with theater and got a lot of opportunities, and then did some community theater when I was in high school. And that was also super fun. And then in college, I was like, well, I need to get a degree that mom and dad won't be mad about. So I did not major in theater. Although I went to the theater department. I was like, can I be in all the plays? And she was like, why don't you just major in theater? Like, that makes the most sense. And I was like, oh, I would never do that. And I think I probably said to her, like, I can't get a useless degree. I probably said something super offensive to the head of the theater department. Needless to say, I wasn't in a ton of plays in college. I was in a few. And after college, I knew freshman year that I was eventually going to move to LA. I was like, no, that's the light in the darkness. I'm going to do that.
Now, why LA?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think because I thought that the industry was there, and I think that, it was I had seen, like, growing up, all of these movies that featured Los Angeles, and it seemed like the place where all the dreams came true. So I was like, well, that's where you go. That's what you do. So after graduation, moved back to Ohio for a minute, got a miserable job. Ooh, that I didn't put on my own list, which I need to remember.
Oh, I'll ask you about it.
Yeah, we'll get there. But got a miserable job being a translator for this underprivileged doctor's office in the middle of downtown Cincinnati. And it was hell. That was an awful, awful job. I lasted, I think, like 5 months, 6 months maybe. And then I was like, nope. I'm out. And secretly on the computer there, whilst I was supposed to be working, I would look up, like, this was when Craigslist was still a place where, like, you could get murdered and you could meet prostitutes, but also you found places to live. So I would, like, look up all of these listings of available apartments in San Diego because LA was too scary. And I was like, well, I'll do San Diego and I'll do acting there, which...
Now, why San Diego?
Less scary. And I visited there with some girlfriends right after college, and I was like, oh, San Diego doesn't feel as scary as LA. Because LA was like, it felt like 57-lane highways, and it was so fast, and it was so big. And I mean, we're small town people. Like, that just was a lot to take in. And so I was like, oh no, I can drive. I'm an idiot. I can drive for auditions up to LA and it'll be fine. And I did that for a while, and it's awful. It is awful. And then I would book work up in LA, and I'd be driving San Diego to LA, and it was awful.
And what's that distance for people that don't know?
Good question. I don't roast me, SoCal people, but I think it's like,
not by like, how long did the drive take you?
Well, it should take hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, like max 2 hours. Oh, there was one time it took me 8.5 hours because traffic is just so bad. So I was driving through the night, and like it was awful. So it just depends. It really just depends. Now, I mean, traffic has gotten so much worse. I think that on average it's about 4 hours now. That's about average. It doesn't even matter when you leave. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so that was for the first. I think I lived in San Diego for like 2-ish years, maybe 3. No, 3. I lived there for 3 years, and I loved it. Made a lot of amazing friends, like some of whom are listening, and like Nick Parisi being one of them, who named the podcast what it is now. What up, Nick? And Kate, who's lovely.
And you had a really cool job there, if I remember.
Yeah, right. It was a very cool job, and we'll get into it. It was a very cool job. I was working in marketing, and it was fun, but it was also like, it was always that thing of, yeah, but this isn't what I want. Like, and I kept advancing. And that was when I knew, like, no, I have to move to LA. And so they moved up to LA, and I was sitting on everything. I was like, well, I'm here, so this counts as acting, right? Someone's gonna find me on a bus and offer me a lead in a movie. And I'm not Channing Tatum, so that didn't happen to me. But I had a lot of really amazing supportive friends from all over, but specifically in San Diego, who knew I moved up to LA for acting. And they were like, get your shit together and start either taking a class or auditioning, but you're wasting your time. Z specifically is who comes to mind for that speech. And it was so helpful. The next day I signed up for improv classes because I didn't know what else to do. And I was working as a hostess at Hard Rock Cafe at the time. And I was surrounded by a bunch of people in entertainment, but not really. Like, it was a bunch of people who kept saying that they were doing things, but nobody, like, if you were to go to them and ask a question of like, hey, what should I sign up for? Or like, is this the right class? They'd be like, oh yeah, I don't know. Because there is that vortex that happens in LA too, which I was guilty of as soon as you get there, you think, well, here we go. I've done all the work I need to do. I'm here. I moved here. Mm-hmm. So here we go. Like, doesn't it start now? And so I was surrounded by a bunch of people at work who were like, yeah, we've chosen hospitality so we can be available for auditions, but like, they weren't repped, or they weren't really going out, or they were talking a lot of it. And I'm not judging them. I was doing the same thing, but I didn't have a touchstone that I could go to and be like, what's the next move here?
No mentor out there.
None. And that kind of like, so then I got an office job based off of the San Diego job. And that was
After the Hard Rock Cafe?
I was doing them simultaneously for a minute, but they kept promising me at Hard Rock that they were like, we're going to make you a server. We're going to make you a server. But then they kept moving me up in the department of host because I was good at it. And I was good at it with other people that were good at it at the time. What up, Kim and Cody? And Lexi. I made a lot of really good friends in that zone, but they kept telling all of us they were going to move us out of that department. But we were so good that they would make us trainers, and then they would be like, we're going to give you a lunch. Aren't you glad? And it was like, yeah, but I can't live on $7.25 an hour with no tips in the middle of LA. Like I can't do that. And in order to move up, actually I left this detail, which is fun. I had booked one of the jobs that I booked up in San Diego. I met this guy who was really nice and super fun. And he and I had stayed in touch when I would go back down to San Diego. And eventually he's like, hey, you can stay at because he had a house at the time. He's like, you can stay at my house instead of paying for a hotel, because I was doing that. It was a weekend job. And so I would stay with him, and we were super like buds. He's like probably 20 years older than I am, like just a nice dude. You met him.
Yes, I visited there. Yeah,
you saw that house.
Yes. I unpacked you.
You sure did. And so coming up to LA was such a big thing of like, oh my God, I don't know where I'm going to live, and I don't know. And it just felt so big. And James was like, actually, my dad's really ill and I have to be in Florida and I need someone to be at my house. And he was like, can you please just go there? And he wasn't going to charge me rent. And I was like, I feel weird about that. So we worked out, like, I think I was paying like nothing. I think I was paying $650, maybe $750, like nothing for a room. And I watched his house and took care of his mail and did all those things, but it benefited both of us, which was serendipitous and lovely. And I ended up, I think I lived with him for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I lived with him for a while, but it was only the only reason it was possible to work at Hard Rock was because I wasn't paying $1,500 a month in rent, which was, about average. So, I don't know what the shift was, but anyway, so I, slowly you get sort of integrated further into LA, and like, you realize, you got to meet people. And like, I was doing like what used to be legal, which is now not, but those casting director workshops, thinking, we're going to meet somebody in casting or like get repped or whatever.
What's a casting director workshop?
That is when you and a bunch of other actors sign up and pay, which is why they became illegal, to go in front of someone who's casting, like in this case, like for like, I think at the time it was Modern Family was shooting at the time. I think Big Bang Theory was shooting at the time. I forget. There were various sitcoms that were shooting in LA, and you were getting in front of the person who decided casting for the show. And like for some people, and some people you guys have heard on this podcast, it worked out for them. It never did for me. And you would get these like arbitrary sheets with notes on them from the casting director that would say, you were great smile, just fuzzy bunny comments. And you would have a scale of 1 to 5, and they would circle the number that they thought you were.
So they weren't actually, it's not like a paid audition. It was like someone who has experience in this industry, you will pay them and they will tell you how to do better in a real audition, or was a real audition?
So all of your questions are very intuitive. So it was presented to us as the actors as, this is not a paid audition. This is a notes exchange, right? But the way that it actually went was you were paying them to just be there. So they could cash these checks through these various like schools or wherever they were being held. And they were giving you notes, but I was not at a level 4 or 5 for these people who at the time were casting major shows. I wasn't strong enough yet. I had a theater background. I didn't have enough film and television experience. I was over the top. I overacted in front of I can remember some of them and be like, oh my God, thinking of that performance now. So it started to feel as though the notes weren't credible. They just wanted you to keep coming back so that they could keep making money. And if there's butts in the seats, they're getting a percentage of everything that everybody's paying, right? So the incentive, and like some of them were $50 for an hour and a half. And at the time, and even, well, especially now, but none of us were making money, really. And so you would save up to try and go to these with just the hope that you would get in front of the right person. It's why they became illegal, because it was so many of us we were just vulnerable. And especially when you don't have, to what you were saying before, like when you don't have a mentor, and especially in the big, vast sort of vortex that is Los Angeles, you think you're making headway. And to be fair, some of my friends, like Dwayne, who's been on the podcast, did book work off of those workshops. So it wasn't a lie for them to say, we are going to consider you for future projects, because they're always looking for the right fit. So in theory, they really were looking for actors, but
They were looking for a check first.
1,000%. Yes. And so that sort of, I don't know, it puts in sort of a nasty flavor in your mouth, and you start to think, is all of the industry sort of doing this kind of grift? Is this a thing? And so you get to a place where you start to think, why am I even pursuing this? And you sort of just, rub your hands together and think it just starts to feel further and further away. But I was also working in an office. I was meeting nobody in the industry, really. The best I had was, I was writing shows and stuff, but for the improv school where I was. And like, we went on tour with our show, and we had, my improv experience at Second City specifically was phenomenal and changed my life. And it got me out of the grind, I guess, of just not like throwing wet paper towels into a vacuum, not even against a wall. You're just like, well, I think this. Was that right? No? Okay. Start over.
Where were you getting the ideas to try these various workshops? Like what guidance were you getting? It
starts to become, I would kind of assume, sort of similar to networking as a lawyer to find the right firm if you don't like clerk or whatever. Or I forget I'm trying to make up words. I don't know what you do. But whatever. It's similar to you and your people. You happen upon a class, right? So I was registered at the Second City, and then you're in theory taking classes with other actors, although that's not always true with improv. Some people are just professional speakers or just want to try it or whatever, which is totally fine. But for the actors you meet in the class, it just becomes this word of mouth thing of, oh, have you heard of fill in the blank? And if you have or haven't, then you think, okay, well, I haven't heard of that. And then they vouch for either the school or the experience, but also keep in mind that those other actors that are recommending these things to you they're no part of the grift. They themselves are getting hoodwinked. So they think...
It's the blind leading the blind, really.
100%. And it's the tricked leading the soon to be tricked, because they don't know that they've paid for something that was, you might as well have written a check to your own asshole. They don't know that. So then they tell you, well, and it was always that sort of untouched story of, did you hear so-and-so booked Silicon Valley? That's the show Dwayne booked. That's why I'm saying it. But like, did you hear that so-and-so booked Silicon Valley? And doesn't that make you hopeful? And so, yeah. And that's the thing, is like the currency of hope that happens in Los Angeles, especially in entertainment, is you start trading the stories of that person that you heard about that booked this one thing. It's like the Channing Tatum coming off of the bus story, right? You just hear of these
stripping off the bus.
Okay, but he should though. You seen that body?
No, I was saying, wasn't he a stripper and that's how he got
Probably.
through?
I lie. I mean, I heard that he...
Anyway.
He also doesn't tip. Boop. We're going to get on that later. But
so this reminds me of those stories you hear about apocalyptic cults that say, the end of the world is Tuesday, and then Tuesday rolls around, the end of the world doesn't happen. And what you would expect if you were sort of rationalizing your way through it is that all of those people would just say, I got hoodwinked, and walk away. But what more commonly happens is it's like you double down. It's almost like a defense mechanism. Like, I don't want to believe that I was manipulated or taken advantage of, so instead I'm going to reconstruct reality such that it is like I wasn't manipulated, I wasn't taken advantage of. Sounds to a much lesser degree similar. Like, I paid for this workshop, so now I'm going to tell other people to pay for this workshop, because if something good happens for somebody else, or then maybe I wasn't manipulated out of money that I worked very hard to earn.
It's a very articulate observation. Ain't she smart, y'all? Ain't she smart? That's why I asked her questions. She's so smart. Yeah, it is 100% that same idea, because... And that sort of is a large portion of the I don't even know what range I would have said I was in at that time as an actor, but I would say that sort of, you're not green. You've been on set. At that point, I had a couple movies under my belt, so I knew sort of how to be on set, but you're also still willing to take background work, and you're still holding on to the story about the story about the story. And it's a totally apt comparison to say that there is some sort of, I don't want to believe I was taken advantage of, so I'm going to use your words, I'm going to alter reality to fit this thing. So much of the money that you spend in acting is that it's the idea that, like, I shot headshots with this very famous couple who was a nightmare. They were so terrible, but the shots were great. But I spent $1,500 for those pictures. And pictures, in theory, once you turn like 25, they're only really good for 3 years. You can push it to 4, but really only 3. And now, granted, I got repped around like a year after I got those pictures, and then I got repped again recently off of those pictures, which is great. And so that would be considered a successful investment. But could I have gotten repped off of, $600 to $800 shots? Probably.
Now, what does repped mean?
Sorry, getting representation. So getting an agent or a manager. And that is sort of the thing that puts you in the next tier, is when you're repped. Now you have someone else, in theory, pitching you. So they're not just submitting you for auditions that they see that might be your type, but in theory, they're taking meetings on your behalf. They're convincing this casting director to be interested in you. If you get an alphabet agency, then they'll pitch you to a studio. They'll pitch you to a network. I mean, you might become the sort of the product that they are now hawking, to be very frank. And when you're in the unrepped tier, nobody's doing that for you but you, which you may as well throw more paper towels into the void. When you're repped, depending on the agency that you have, in theory, you're at least getting pitched, in theory.
Now, if you're repped and you on your own get an opportunity, does your representative then take some portion of what you earn from that opportunity that you got yourself?
That's a fair question, and yes. Yes, because the theory is that if you choose to take on what is technically their job, and if you which would be you opening more opportunities for yourself, that's all well and good. You can spend your time doing that, but you are part of their branding. And so that's awesome that you got yourself an opportunity. We'll take our 10% now, please.
You can see sort of, it seems like because there's a lack of transparency about how these things work, and there's also probably not a very set path to achieving, within the acting or entertainment industry, there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of people.
Yes.
Because, you don't know if this is the way to do it. Who knows what the way is to do it?
How did Harvey Weinstein become this predatory mass? It's a comedy podcast, everybody have fun. But how did he get to the like quiet level of raping all of these women that he got to? Because it's like, use your words, exactly. There is not, it's one of the few industries where I feel like you could go to Tisch, which is a phenomenal school. You could go to SC is a great school. You could go into any one of the I could list so many more. I'm not being exclusionary to say that those are the only two that are great. There's so many great theater, artistic, whatever schools in this country and outside of this country. And it is the one career where you can invest all of this money to get a piece of paper that shows your, Meisner work. If you're, classically trained, all the Shakespeare work, just all of this deep diving soul work you did to become better. And you could work a fast food job for the remainder of your life. There is not you go to undergrad for 4 years, then you go to law school, then you're a lawyer. There just isn't that in acting, which is, look, we choose it. But the ability to take advantage of people that are pursuing the arts, specifically acting, because I can speak to that because I'm doing it, it is astounding. I mean, my first audition was for a porn and I didn't know it. And it was dangerous and awful. And found it on Craigslist.
Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when was this?
This was I had moved to LA specifically. So I guess I shouldn't say it was my first LA audition. It was my first audition once I finally lived in LA, and I was living with James, and he was a working actor, like on a television show, very, very working. And I showed it to him just casually, like, look, I got this audition, because the way that the audition read, it said a feature film looking specifically seeking unknown talent, which was often, I know.
No.
I know, girl. I know.
No, I'm not saying I wouldn't. I just knowing how it ends, it's funny.
Yeah.
So.
Unknown talent. But the thing is like that you had heard that Craigslist might be a place where they would do that, right? Because if you're going outside of the agency world, in the agency world, those are a lot of faces you recognize. So if you really are actually genuinely seeking unknown talent, Craigslist might be the place to do it, right? And it said, shooting on the back lot of Universal Studios. And I had worked at Universal Studios for a job in October. And so I was like, okay, they know the language. So it felt like, oh, this probably is, associated with Universal Studios. And then I forget, I printed it and saved. I put it in my acting file because I was like, come on, girl. Come on. We're not going to do this again. But some language thereof, I don't have it in front of me, but it was essentially, they said all the right things.
Flexibility.
Oh, yeah. And, SAG scale, which I wasn't SAG. And it said, if you're not SAG, we'll work around it. Like there was just all of these things that they just knew the language. Anyway, so I show it to my roommate, like, look, I got this audition. I'm so excited. He goes, oh my God, don't go. And I was like, who is you? No, this is my audition. I'm going. And he was like, do not go. And I was like, I'm leaving the house.
Did he explain why?
He was very good at letting me be green in some things and letting me learn. All he said was, he goes, this ain't a Universal Studios, girl. And I was like, but it is. And you don't know.
You can't lie on Craigslist.
Correct. It's vetted. It's Craigslist.
Craig doesn't allow that.
Craig is very kind. So I go and I drive there, and God bless him, he drives there too, he was protective big brother. He was like, like I said, he was 20 years older than me, like very kind. Well, kids, there's a building on, I think it's not Lancashire. I can't think of the name of the street. Maybe it's Lancashire. The very top of the building says Vivid Entertainment. Now, I did not know. I thought, well, that's a cool studio. And it's the top of the building. And I was like, and the audition again didn't say go to Vivid offices, go to whatever. Like it didn't. It was like, just go to this address, go to the 12th floor, whatever. So it said, call this number when you get here. Now I get in the elevator and there's a lot of pictures of dicks. And I was like,
in the elevator?
In the elevator. And I was like, uh-oh. Maybe he's right.
But I'm still going to plow ahead.
Yep. Because I'm an actor.
Wait, is it like wallpaper?
Oh no, it's one of those. You know,
like
Vegas,
how many are we talking about here?
I wish I could remember it. But you know how like in Vegas, how they have those little plastic. They have these in New York too, where it's like an ad in the elevator that you're meant to look at. A lot of dicks in that. I don't remember how many. And so the note on the audition said, call this number when you get up to the 12th floor or whatever. My assistant will answer and come and get you. So call the number. I hear some dude. I can't script this. I hear some dude go, hello. And I was like, oh, hey, is this Chris? It's Kate Gaffney. I'm here for this audition. But when he goes, yeah, no problem. I'll come get you. And like 13 seconds later, this dude comes around who I'm like, and he's like, hi, I forget, Jared or whatever. And I was like, boy, that voice is familiar. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, he was being his own assistant. And there's dicks in the elevator. Fuck. I was like, I'm too committed because I'm an actor. I'm so serious. So at this point, I see there's another girl in the waiting area who was, drop dead out of a magazine gorgeous. And I was like, hope she ain't going for the same role I am because we in sweats. Oh, I didn't dress up. She did. And there was a fish tank and like it had a weird like sort of doctor's office-y vibes, which who knew that porn offices were like that. And he takes me back to this room and it's an office. He's got no camera in there, which I knew enough for auditions where I'm like, he should film this. This is very odd, which is actually a good thing. And there's like bookshelves like filled with the same book. And I was like, but it was a female author. And I'm like, this ain't this dude's office. And he was like, welcome to my office. Like, we're just going to talk about the role. And I was like, oh, where's the reader? And he's like, well, I'll be acting as the reader. And I was like, oh, so your assistant won't be reading? Because at this point I was a little pissed, but I didn't have enough confidence to A, leave, which is what I should have done, or B, be like, yo, bro, I know that was you answering your own fucking phone pretending to be your assistant. And also, I also have now figured out this ain't at Universal Studios, okay? You ain't attached to a studio. But I didn't say any of that. And so he's like, yeah, I'll be your reader. The script is predictably garbage. And he didn't send it to me ahead of time, which I also didn't know was a bad thing for an audition. I just didn't know.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, you should always get it ahead of time, because how are you going to prep? What am I going to just sit there and just like pull out my tits? I mean, I guess some people would, but that wasn't. And I also had the audition breakdown also had a description of what the screenplay was, which I also thought was normal. So he hands me the garbage script. He's doing the male part. So we read back and forth, and I'm crushing it, even under this amount of pressure. No, I was not. I'm sure I was terrible. But we get to the last like bit, and in parentheses, which is also not how you would, like, you're not going to put, in an actual screenplay, you're not putting like notes about stage. Like, you put stage direction, but you wouldn't put like, and now the girl walks over to the left and then to the right. It's too specific. Like the director does that, right? So those notes are all in there. And then it's like, and then she promptly takes off her clothes and they passionately make out. And he says to me, he was like, now, just because we haven't cast the male lead yet, he goes, would you, so we would want to do a chemistry test. And I knew enough to say, oh, sure, yeah, chemistry tests happen once you narrow it down, though, right? And he goes, oh, yeah. Because chemistry tests are real, right? Those usually happen for sitcoms and major films. And what it is it's making sure that you, the female, have actual on-screen chemistry, which is a real thing with the male lead, right? Well, there's no camera in this audition room. And also, you're not going to chemistry test me before you've narrowed your pool down.
And what exactly does a chemistry test usually involve?
It's literally, it shouldn't involve physical contact, if we're being clear. I'll use a very common example, Jim and Pam for The Office. It was down to, I think, 2 other couples, and they were mixing and matching the people. And so they would put Jetta Fisher with, I don't know, some guy, Chris Smith or whatever, and they'd see how they did. So they'd literally just do lines back and forth. That's it. And then it would be plug and play and be like, okay, what's the most believable relationship here? And so that's what a chemistry test is. I guess on porn, it's just, does your dick fit? I don't know how that works. But so he was like, oh, yeah. He like backpedaled a little bit. And I hear, God love him, I hear my roommate in the lobby like, Kate, and like, God love him. And I was like, well, okay, I'll wait to hear from you. And he goes, now the callbacks are going to be at the location. And then he's like, he gives me the street. And again, I was super new to LA, but I knew the street was not where Universal was. And I was like, oh, so like at a house in Burbank? And he was like, well, yeah, and then I was like, okay, great. Yes, please call me. Have your assistant call me, in fact. And then what I wanted to do was run to the girl who was in the lobby and be like, don't do it. Get out of here. But then I was like, I don't know, maybe she wants to be in porn. Like maybe she knew. But I talked to my friend Britton's mom, who has been a working actor forever. And I showed her the audition breakdown, and she was like, she goes, you call SAG right now and you let SAG know that he's utilizing their union to push forward this audition. Anyway, this is the longest intro of all time. I'm so sorry. Everybody's left the podcast. Everyone has just walked out into traffic. They're like, this is so boring.
No, again, you have a very good relationship with the editor. So
True. I'm going to cut all this out. So yeah, so the guy, he called me back for a secondary audition and a call back, and I was like, hell no. And my roommate was like, he didn't rub it in my face, God love him, but he was like, you didn't see the building and think maybe this was weird? And I was like, I don't know what Vivid is. And he was like, do you know what it is now? And I was like, I do know what it is now. I do.
I put it together in the elevator
with the dick poster. So anyway, yeah. So that was all just very, and you're right. I mean, that is sort of how entertainment goes in Los Angeles in the beginning. So I don't know that everybody has the porn story. I'm actually really proud of that story. That it was like, nothing happened to me other than being super pissed I wasted my time, but also being like, oh, this guy's a jackass. But
I mean,
anyway.
like, do you think he like broke in there? Like, do you think he worked there? Or
No,
he's the only dude that's there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was an office. I mean, so it was as if, you know, those offices like WeWork where you can rent an individual actual just like office space. So I think he was WeWorking his way into like free porn for himself, because the office like why would he have, 75 copies of a book by some female author that he isn't, right? Unless that's his pen name. I don't know. I didn't think to ask. But yeah, I don't know. So my assumption is that maybe Vivid has a handful of floors in the building, but you can accept the dick poster because you're like, well, this is the Vivid building, so this is the home of porn, I guess. So I don't really, that piece I don't totally understand. But my assumption is that it was a day office so that he could seem as if he were legit and trick a bunch of chicks and see who he could make out with in the office. I don't know. It did not work on me. And I was cute. I was young. I was in my early 20s.
So with these experiences like that and the workshops with the casting directors, like how did you keep from being discouraged?
Oh, I didn't. I was constantly. And I was done. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard, and it's too, like, we're from a town of 6,000 people. We're not like these sheltered little babies, but I mean, when you're raised in Los Angeles and you're raised in that industry, you can have a different relationship to it and you can understand it better. I just took you at your word, right? Like, why on earth would you trick people with an audition? Why would you? And Groundlings beat the shit out of me. It was such a mean program. And they would always say, we're replicating the industry. We're doing what the industry would do. But it was a lot of I better be careful how I say this. My teachers, if you were famous in my class, which some people were, it was odd how much approval your scenes got. And if you were not famous, which I wasn't, it was amazing how I felt like the goal was to make me cry or to make students cry.
So tell us about that. When did you do this? Groundlings.
I don't remember. I did it.
Actually, I'm sorry. Let me stop you there. Go back. Why did you start taking improv classes?
Because it was literally like the San Diego people that were living in my ass about you better do something. I was like, I guess improv. Because I literally didn't know what to do. So my thing was always, well, just go back to school. You've been going to school your whole life. Just go back to school. Learn it then.
Why improv and not like an acting class?
Because I heard that, and I wish I could remember. I don't remember who said this to me, but I had heard that for commercial work, they made sure that they looked at your resume for training and found improv on there. So if you even wanted to be on someone's radar, you needed to have some sort of improv training. And I had like a little, but I didn't have an official school. And it was the right decision for sure at the time, but Groundlings was not the right decision. I just kept going because I was so discouraged and I wasn't getting work, and I was tired of doing background work, and I was tired of doing, producing random shit that wasn't fun. So I was like, well, I'm going to go to the Mecca, because, you hear all these stories of all these people that went to SNL after, the Groundlings, or went on to massive careers and had a really positive experience there. But I had also heard from actor friends that I respected, like, get ready, girl, saddle up. It's a whole thing. And my first handful of levels there were not bad. But it was when you got further along and they told you every class is an audition. Well, it's like, who's got the energy for a 4.5 hour audition every week? And
where's your safe space?
Not there. And how do you, and that's a great question. Like, how do you improvise well if it's not safe? You don't. I didn't. And they also do side coaching there, which I wasn't used to, because at Second City, they'll let you finish a scene. Like, I had a teacher throw a chair at me in Second City. So like, they weren't giving out hugs, but it was a much different environment than someone who's side coaching, that when you make a choice, which improv is literally just pulled out of your ass, you make some choice and they're like, no, do it again. And you're like, okay. I mean, again, I'm not some precious flower in a lot of regards. I can handle it. At that point I had thicker skin from just the industry telling me to eat a bag of dicks. But I was so used to a supportive improv environment that was lovely, and I made all of these amazing friends. And in these classes at Groundlings, everybody viewed you as competition. There was one time I asked a question in class and the teacher was like, wow, that was a dumb question. And all of the students turned to me and they were like, yeah, why'd you ask that? And it was like, oh, I'm like in class with my competition. And they very much recognized that. And I was like, fuck, I have to switch everything in my brain. And so to keep going through the levels, they would midway through the term sit down with you and tell you all the places where you were shitting the bed. And then they'd be like, you get 3 weeks to fix this. And you can only retake this class twice. And look, it is a microcosm of how competitive the industry is. So I appreciate what it showed me as far as who you can trust and who you can't, and to start to get real judicious about who you can and can't trust, and recognize that, yeah, this is your competition. This is your competition. So don't lean on them and don't use them in a scene to get better and better and better. Do you and take care of you, which is so the antithesis of improv.
Yeah.
Improv is hand it over, build, give it to them, let them get better.
To each other.
Gifts, relationships.
Teams, community, all that.
All of it. And at Groundlings, it was like character work, accents, move. And you have to do this thing at the end, right before you get into Writer's Lab, called 5 Through the Door. You come up with these 5 characters, you write a monologue for each of them, you do a 3-minute scene as that character, and then you switch into all 5, and you do it in front of the whole class and your teacher. And I had a teacher this was a guy that was just constantly like living in my anus. And I did 4 characters, and I was like, that's it. And I sat down. He didn't tell me I had only done 4. I was clearly too nervous and forgot that I hadn't done the 5th. And I sat down and I was like, oh my God. And all the students were doing like arms crossed and were just looking at me. And so at a break, I went to him in tears and I was like, oh my God, I forgot to do the 5th character. Oh my God. And he was like, I know you did. And I said, I worked really hard on it. I was like, can I do the 5th? Can I do it over? And he was like, we'll see if we'll let you do it next class. So a week passes where I have to, like, I'm studying her like religiously. I'm doing everything as this character. And I get to the class and I'm just sitting there waiting. He waits till the last fucking 5 minutes of class. And he goes, well, I'm sure as we can all remember, Kate forgot to do a character last week. So we're going to give her a chance. And like, and then I was supposed to get up and act, and who can act in that? But I did. And he passed me. And he literally, for the next week, when he sat me down and was like, I passed you, but only because you came back with that character. Your first 4 were terrible, but we'll let you have this one. And it was like,
what do you mean let you have one?
I mean, it was just, and after that, I took one more level and I was done. And Karen Moriyama, who was my teacher there for my last level, was lovely and decidedly changed my improv for the better. She actually was a good teacher there. And so I will never talk shit about the school as a whole, but my experience there was extraordinarily negative, and I stopped doing improv for 3 years after that because I was like, this is awful. This is awful. And it's like, it takes all the fun and joy out of pretending. You were just fucking pretending, guys. It's not that serious. But it was a lot. This is forever. I'm sorry. I don't want to waste our time.
No. Okay. You want me to?
No. I'm sorry. So let's wrap up this section. I'm so sorry that I'm talking forever.
It's wonderful. That's what the point of this is.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. What's something embarrassing you've never told our parents?
See, I put this question in here and now
don't
I
act
regret it. I'm not surprised.
All right, we can move on. We don't have to do that.
No, I have to answer it. I'm not going to be that guest because I've had to interview those guests. Just kidding. You've all been fantastic. Something embarrassing I've never told our parents. Part of why I was hospitalized for the migraine senior year was because I drank too much. They'll never know that. Oh, was that sad? All right, let me tell a different one.
No, I'm sorry you were in the hospital.
No, whatever. It was fine. I'm a hero. What's something embarrassing?
How many rules you followed.
Yeah, that is embarrassing. That's right. How good of a kid I was. How few sheets I ruined with permanent marker. That's the answer to that question. I should have come up with an answer. I don't have one.
All right. Well, we'll move on.
You want to answer it?
Oh, no. Who's the interviewer and who's the interviewee? All right. Well, that was our appetizer course, and it is on to the entrees after a quick break.